You ever look back at a moment and think, that was the second everything changed? Not a loud moment. Not some big fight or tearful breakdown. Just quiet, casual, harmless looking. They say temptation doesn't always knock on the door wearing red lipstick or whisper dirty things in your ear. No. Sometimes it shows up in the form of laughter over dinner, a lingering glance in the kitchen, a thank you that feels just a little too sincere. And sometimes it shows up in the form of your friend's son, David. It's strange saying his name out loud now. Like I'm confessing to something I've spent months trying to convince myself wasn't even real. But it was real. And it started on one of those days where everything in your life feels gray. You know the kind I mean? Not sad enough to cry. Not happy enough to smile. Just numb. My husband was in his usual place, buried in work, barely looking up when I walked into the room. The kids were at school. The silence in the house was heavy. And I remember thinking, God, I don't even know the last time someone asked me how I'm doing. Not just out of politeness, but like they really cared to know. And then David walked in. He was supposed to stay just for a few days. Rachel, my old friend from college, had flown out of the country unexpectedly and asked if her son could crash at ours while he sorted his new apartment in town. I said yes, of course. I'd known him since he was little. Watched him grow from this awkward teenager into a young man with this calm, gentle energy that just settled the room. I never imagined I'd look at him the way I eventually did. But then again, I also never imagined feeling as invisible as I'd become. That morning, God, I remember it so clearly. I was baking banana bread. I do that when I'm trying to feel something. I had jazz playing softly, the smell of cinnamon filling the kitchen. And David walked in, yawning, rubbing his eyes like a sleepy little boy. Except he wasn't a boy anymore. He leaned on the counter and said, "Something smells amazing." And then he smiled at me. Not a flirty smile. Not a smirk. Just warm, present, kind. And in that moment, I realized how long it had been since someone looked at me like I was more than just mom, or wife, or errand runner. I scooped a bit of the batter with a spoon, held it out, and without thinking, I said, "Wanna taste it?" He hesitated, just for a second, then leaned forward and took it. I swear, the way his eyes closed for a second, the soft that left his lips, it was like he was tasting more than just sugar and flour. It was attention. It was intimacy. It was a moment that shouldn't have meant anything, but somehow meant everything. And as I pulled the spoon back and turned away, pretending to check the oven, pretending not to feel the heat crawling up my neck, I knew. Something had shifted. Not between us, not yet, but inside me, a door had creaked open. One I wasn't even sure existed anymore. And the scariest part? A tiny voice inside whispered, "You liked that. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where we speak the truths we often bury." The next story might echo something you've never dared to say aloud. I've been married 14 years. And for most of them, I've felt alone. Not the kind of alone you feel when someone leaves. The kind of alone that stays even when someone's right beside you. My husband, he's not a bad man. He provides, he shows up for the practical things. But emotionally, it's like he left the room years ago and never came back. We talk logistics, groceries, bills, the kids' schedules, but the kind of conversation that used to stretch long into the night, that vanished. He doesn't notice the way I wear my hair anymore. Doesn't ask how I'm feeling. Doesn't touch me unless it's routine. And even then, it feels mechanical. Like checking off a box. I used to fight it. Used to bring it up. Cry about it. Beg for a connection. But after a while, you stop asking to be seen. You just go quiet. You shrink yourself down until even the mirror forgets you're there. That's the version of me David met. Rachel had called out of the blue. Emergency work trip overseas. Her son, David, had just moved back to town and needed a place to stay temporarily. She trusted me. And I trusted myself. At least, I thought I did. David, he wasn't a boy anymore. Last time I saw him, he was 17. All awkward limbs and nervous laughs. Now he was 21. Calm. Observant. Present in a way most people aren't anymore. He had this gentleness about him. The way he'd look you in the eye when you spoke. The way he listened without rushing you. The way he noticed things like when I'd tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear or sigh without meaning to. He noticed. The house, usually filled with quiet and routine, shifted when he arrived. Mornings started with small talk over coffee. Evenings stretched longer with him helping in the kitchen, asking about my favorite books, my childhood, my dreams. No one had asked me about my dreams in years. At first, I told myself it was nothing. He was just polite, curious, friendly. But underneath that, something else stirred. Something dangerous. Something I'd buried so deep, I forgot it had a pulse. And maybe what scared me most was how alive I started to feel. My kids adored him. He was respectful, kind, helped out without being asked. And my husband? He barely noticed. Didn't pick up on the way David looked at me a second too long, or how my smile returned a little more each day. I tried to push the feeling away. Tried to stay grounded in the reality of what was right, what was appropriate. But every time David walked into a room, I felt something shift. A light flickering back on in a house that had lived in shadows for far too long. It was one of those afternoons where the house felt slow, not heavy, just quiet. The kids were at school. My husband off somewhere, probably still in his office, buried in spreadsheets or silence. The kind of day where time moves in syrupy stretches. I found myself in the kitchen, pulling out ingredients for banana bread. It's something I make when I'm trying to feel grounded. Something about the smell, the softness of the batter, the warmth that fills the air when it bakes. It brings me back to something familiar. Something safe. I had music playing. Something slow, old. One of those songs that wraps around you like a memory. And there I was, whisk in hand, halfway through mashing bananas, when I heard footsteps behind me. David. He leaned on the counter, arms crossed, watching me. His voice broke the silence, soft but curious. Is that banana bread? I nodded without looking up. It's kind of my thing, I said, smiling. Wanna help? He did. He moved beside me, reading off ingredients from the recipe card, like it was some kind of ritual. And I found myself laughing. Not polite laughter, but real, breath-catching, eyes-crinkling laughter. God, I missed that. At one point, I dipped the spoon into the bowl and held it out to him, without thinking. Here. Taste it, I said, teasing. Let me know if it's worthy of the legend. He paused. Just for a second. Looked at me. Really looked. Then leaned in and took the spoon into his mouth. Slowly, deliberately. And for the briefest moment, everything else disappeared. The kitchen, the music, even the sound of my own breath. His eyes closed as he tasted it. A low hum escaped his throat. When he opened his eyes again, he said, I've never tasted anything like this. And I swear to you, it wasn't about the banana bread. There was something in his gaze. Something warm. Appreciation. Admiration. Almost like he saw me. Not just the woman who cooked and cleaned and existed in the background, but me. And suddenly, the kitchen felt smaller. The air a little thicker. Like the walls had leaned in closer, waiting to see what I'd do next. I turned away quickly. Pretended to check the oven temperature. Said something about timers and texture, but my hands were shaking, because I knew. It wasn't just a spoon. Not anymore. It was a line. A door. A whisper of something I'd forgotten I still craved. And the scariest part? I didn't want to take it back. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there, still, quiet, listening to the sound of my husband's breath beside me. Slow. Shallow. Peaceful in a way that felt almost cruel. Like the world hadn't shifted a few inches off its axis earlier that day. Like I hadn't just felt something I wasn't supposed to feel. I stared at the ceiling, eyes wide open, heart too loud in my chest. I kept replaying it, David's eyes as he looked at me. The way he said, "I've never tasted anything like this," as if he was talking about more than just banana bread. As if he was tasting me, the version of me I didn't even realize was still alive underneath all the numbness. And I kept asking myself, why did that moment feel so intimate? It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a touch. But something passed between us. And it settled into me like a secret. I tried to laugh it off in my head. He's just a boy. Rachel's son. You're being ridiculous. But then my thoughts turned to my husband. To the man sleeping inches away from me, yet somehow galaxies apart. 14 years. 14 years of missed anniversaries. Of dry "I love yous" that felt more like habits than declarations. Of quiet dinners where the clinking of cutlery said more than we ever did. Of being touched like a task. Kissed like a courtesy. I thought about the last time he looked at me, really looked. I couldn't even remember. Maybe the Christmas our youngest was born. Maybe never. And then I thought of David. How his compliments had been so soft, so easy, so true. The way he said I had a peaceful energy. The way he asked what kind of music I liked and actually listened. The way his eyes lingered, not in a crude way, but like he was genuinely trying to understand something about me. It felt like hearing a song I used to love but forgot existed. A melody I didn't know I'd been missing. And now that I'd heard it again, I couldn't turn it off. I turned my face into the pillow, hoping the dark would swallow my thoughts. But it didn't. It magnified them. They echoed in the quiet. Was it just the loneliness talking? Was it just the ache of not being seen, not being wanted, not being touched for years? Or was it something else? Something deeper. Something dangerously close to desire? I hated myself for thinking it. But at the same time, there was a part of me, a quiet, buried part. That felt warm again. Awake. And that scared me more than anything. Because once you've tasted that feeling, once your soul exhales after holding its breath for so long, you start wondering just how long you've been starving. The days that followed, they changed something in the rhythm of the house. It wasn't obvious. Not loud. But it was there in the way David lingered longer in the kitchen. The way he started asking more questions. The way he watched me. Like he was paying attention to details no one else had bothered to notice in years. He offered to help with dinner one night, stood beside me, chopping vegetables, sleeves rolled up, talking about music and books and all the little things that make a person feel known. At one point, I dropped a spoon, and when we both reached for it, our fingers touched. Not a spark. Not electricity. But warmth. Steady. Real. His hand didn't pull away right away. And neither did mine. We laughed it off. Pretended it didn't mean anything. But we both felt the weight of that pause. Like the silence between two notes in a song that says more than the melody ever could. He complimented my hair a few days later. Said it looked nice up like that. No one had said that to me in, God, I don't even know how long. And I found myself noticing things. How his eyes crinkled when he smiled. How he smelled like cedar and something faintly sweet. How he moved with this quiet confidence that made the room feel safe. One evening we watched a movie, just the two of us. The kids were asleep. My husband was in the study. The lights were low and the couch suddenly felt too small. We weren't touching, but it felt like we were. There was this moment during a scene, two characters confessing something they shouldn't, and I felt his eyes on me. Not just looking, searching. I didn't meet his gaze. I couldn't, because I knew what was in mine. The next morning, without even thinking about it, I wore something different. Nothing dramatic. Just a softer blouse. A little blush. Lipstick. Perfume I hadn't touched in months. I told myself it was for me. That I deserved to feel beautiful again. But deep down, I knew. It was because of him. Every time we crossed paths, it was like the air changed. like we were having conversations without words. Little moments kept happening. He'd brush past me and his hand would graze my lower back. He'd ask questions that felt intentional. Did you always want to be a mom? What did you dream about when you were my age? Questions that reached deep. Questions my own husband never thought to ask. And I kept telling myself it was harmless. That I was just enjoying the attention. That I just needed to feel alive again, even if it was through someone else's son. But late one night, I walked into the kitchen for water. David was already there, shirtless, leaning against the counter, drinking tea. The moment stretched. He looked at me. Not like a boy. Not like a guest. Like a man who had something to say. And then he did. Softly, carefully, he said, "I wish someone would look at me the way you do." I stood there, frozen, because I knew exactly what he meant. And worse, I knew exactly how he felt. That night, the storm rolled in without warning. The sky cracked open, thunder loud enough to rattle the windows, wind pressing hard against the walls like it was trying to get in. The lights flickered once, then went out completely. I lit a few candles in the kitchen. The soft glow danced on the walls, throwing shadows that felt too alive, too close. The silence between the thunderclaps was thick, heavy. The kids were already asleep upstairs. My husband, as usual, had locked himself away in the study with his laptop and noise-canceling headphones, like he needed a barrier between himself and the rest of the house. I was pouring hot chocolate when I heard him behind me. David. He stepped into the kitchen like the storm had drawn him in. His shirt hung loose, hair a little damp from the rain that had started earlier. I handed him a mug. My hands were shaking. I hoped he didn't notice. But he did. He always did. We sat at the table, 2 candles between us, casting a glow that made everything feel too soft, too intimate. The kind of light that makes secrets easier to speak out loud. He sipped, said it was good. And then, after a pause, he looked down and said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm not really here. Like I'm just going through the motions. Smiling when I'm supposed to, laughing on cue. But inside, I feel like a ghost." I looked at him, and for a second, I didn't see Rachel's son. I saw someone just like me, empty in all the same places. I don't know what made me say it. Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was the quiet. Maybe it was the way his voice cracked a little on that last word. But I whispered, "I know that feeling." He looked up, said nothing, just waited, and I kept going. I haven't felt wanted in a long time, not seen, not touched in a way that makes me feel anything. I'm just here, filling roles, folding laundry, cooking dinners, sleeping beside a man who doesn't even notice when I'm crying. The air between us shifted. The storm faded to the background. It was just his eyes, and mine, and everything I wasn't supposed to say, rising to the surface. My voice broke when I said it. I don't even know the last time someone reached for me. Not out of habit, but out of want. He didn't speak. But his eyes, they softened, and in that softening I felt something dangerous. Something tender. Something real. He reached across the table, slow, careful. Placed his hand over mine. I didn't pull away. I should have. But I didn't. And for a moment, time folded in on itself. It wasn't lust. It wasn't impulse. It was 2 broken hearts finding a quiet place to rest. We leaned in. Closer. Close enough that I could feel his breath. My heart raced. My throat tightened. I don't know who moved first. But our lips almost met. Almost. I pulled back. Just in time. But not far enough. Because the moment had already happened. The want had already spoken, and silence couldn't take it back. We didn't say anything for a long time. Just sat there, listening to the rain. And then, with a voice so low I almost missed it, he said, "If you ever offered again, I wouldn't say no." The next morning, the air was different. Not heavy, not tense. Just off. Like something had been knocked out of place and no one was willing to acknowledge it. David barely looked at me when he came into the kitchen. He mumbled a good morning. Didn't linger like he usually did. Didn't ask about breakfast. Didn't sit at the counter with that easy calm that had become part of my routine. And I couldn't look at him either. I busied myself with dishes that didn't need washing. Wiped down a counter that was already clean. Moved like I was made of glass, terrified that one wrong step would shatter everything. He left early that day. Said he needed some air. Didn't say where he was going. Didn't say when he'd be back. And when the door closed behind him, I exhaled for the first time in hours, and then immediately felt the guilt crawl back in. My husband walked into the kitchen not long after. Kissed the top of my head like nothing had changed. Like the storm last night hadn't happened. Like the version of me he touched was still whole. Still untouched. He didn't notice my red eyes. Didn't ask if I was okay. Just picked up his coffee and scrolled through his phone. And in that moment, I realized something that broke me all over again. He wouldn't notice even if I disappeared. That afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from David. Thank you for letting me taste what love feels like, even if just for a second. I stared at those words until the screen dimmed. Not lust. Not temptation. He'd called it love. And maybe that's what hurt the most. Because deep down, I think I believed him. I sat on the floor, back against the kitchen cabinet, phone still in my hand, and I cried. Not the kind of cry that comes in sobs. The kind that sneaks out slow, quiet, from a place too deep to name. I cried for the girl I used to be, for the woman I've become. For the years I spent waiting to be seen. For the few seconds where I finally was. And for the reality that nothing had really changed. Not on the outside. Not in my marriage. Not in the eyes of anyone who might be watching. But inside. Inside, I had crossed something. A line. A threshold. A truth I couldn't unfeel. I didn't cheat. Not in the way people think. But in my heart. I crossed a line I can't uncross. I ask myself the same question more often than I'd like to admit. Was I wrong? For wanting something so simple, so human, to be seen, to be heard, to be wanted? Because I didn't go looking for it. I didn't plan it. I didn't wake up that morning hoping to feel that flicker of warmth from someone else's sun. But when it came, when it brushed up against the emptiness inside me like a match to dry wood, I didn't move away. I let it burn. Quietly. Carefully. But still, I let it burn. I haven't spoken to Rachel since. How could I? How do you look a friend in the eye when her son reminded you that you're still alive? That you still have a heartbeat beneath all the numbness? David never came back. Not even to collect the things he left behind. He sent someone else. And I didn't fight it. Because what would I say? That I miss him? That I still sometimes walk past the kitchen and remember the warmth of that stormy night? That I still feel his words in the quiet corners of my heart? If you ever offered again, I haven't told anyone. Not a soul. Not even my reflection, though she already knows. She stares back at me now with eyes I barely recognize. There's something softer in them. And something lonelier, too. I carry this like a secret stitched into the lining of my skin. It doesn't show, but it's there. Everywhere. My marriage hasn't changed. We still move like roommates. Still talk logistics. Still go to bed with miles of silence between us. But now, the silence isn't just empty. It's heavy, because now I know what it feels like to be seen. To be felt. To be wanted even for a second. And I know that no matter how much I try to forget, I'll never unknow that feeling. I'll never unlive that moment. I'll never stop asking myself if it was really a mistake. Or just a moment of being human. And maybe that's the cruelest part of it all, knowing that the worst kind of betrayal is the one you commit against yourself. Quiet, justified, and unforgettable. Have you ever let someone in, not out of lust, not out of recklessness, but simply because they made you feel alive again? Like for the first time in years, you mattered. Not for what you did. Not for what you held together. But just for being you. Because that's what it was for me. It wasn't about the spoon. Or the smile. It wasn't even about David, not entirely. It was about the part of me that had been aching in silence. That quiet, untouched part of me that just wanted to be held, emotionally, mentally, gently, by someone who noticed I still existed. So I'll ask you, was I wrong? For offering him a taste of something I'd buried for far too long? Or was I just a woman, starving for connection? Tell me your truth in the comments. Have you ever stood in a moment like mine? Have you ever made a choice that wasn't black or white, just human? I read every story you share, not with judgment, but with understanding. If this story stirred something in you, subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, where silence turns into stories too heavy to carry alone. And tap the bell because the next one might echo something you've never dared to say out loud.